Before you sleep, let me tell you about a summer when an entire city lost control of its own body. In July of 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a woman stepped out of her house and began to dance in the street. There was no music, no wedding, no festival, no reason that anyone watching could name. She simply began to move on the warm cobblestones, alone, and she did not stop. The records remember her as Frau Trophäa. She danced through the long afternoon. She danced into the dark. When her body finally failed her and she dropped into sleep, she woke and began again, as if something had taken hold of her and would not let go. Her neighbors gathered to watch. Within a week, more than 30 of them had joined her, not in celebration. They danced the way she did, with the same blank, driven, exhausted motion, as though they had no choice in it at all. Within a month, the chroniclers tell us, as many as 400 people were dancing in the streets of Strasbourg, and no one knew how to make it stop. Settle in. Let's go back to that strange and frightening summer. To understand what happened, you have to understand the city it happened to. Strasbourg in 1518 was not a happy place. For years the harvests had failed, bread had grown scarce and dear. The cold and the hunger had been followed, as they so often were, by disease. Smallpox moved through the crowded lanes. A new and terrible affliction was spreading, the one they simply called the pox. Families were burying their children. The almshouses were full. It was a city living on its nerves. And in that kind of place, people reach for meaning. They watch the sky for signs. They wonder what they have done to deserve it, and what is coming next. There was an old fear in that part of Europe, woven deep into the faith of ordinary people. They believed that a saint named Vitus could punish the wicked, and that one of his punishments was a curse of helpless, endless dancing. To dance against your own will was not a strange idea to them. It was a thing that could happen to anyone whose soul was in danger. So when Frau Trophäa began to move, the people of Strasbourg did not see a medical case. They saw a warning. The city authorities called for the physicians. The doctors examined the dancers and set the supernatural aside. This was not the work of the stars, they decided, and not, in their judgment, a curse from God. It was a natural illness, a matter of what they called hot blood, an overheating of the body that could only be cured by letting it run its course. And so the council made a decision that is hard to believe even now. If the sickness was hot blood that had to burn itself out through dancing, then the cure was to let them dance. More than that, to help them. They cleared the guild halls and turned them into dance floors. They built wooden stages in the horse market and the grain market, out in the open where everyone could see. They hired musicians, drummers and fiddlers and pipers, and paid them to play. They even brought in strong, healthy dancers to move alongside the afflicted and keep them going. A city was watching its own people suffer, and its answer was to put them on a stage and play them music. It did not work. It made everything worse. The music drew more of the afflicted out into the squares. The dancing spread, and the bodies that had been moving for days began to break down. These were not graceful dancers. By now they were swaying and staggering, their feet bloodied, their faces empty. Some collapsed and could not be roused. The accounts speak of dancers falling from exhaustion, from what may have been heart attacks and strokes, of people who simply gave out under the strain. How many died, we do not actually know. Later tellings of the story claim that at the height of it, 15 people were dying every day. But the honest truth is that the city's own records from that summer do not give us a number, and some do not mention deaths at all. What we can say is that hundreds of human beings danced themselves past the limits of what a body can take, and that some of them did not get up. The rest is a figure that grew in the retelling. By the end of the summer, the city changed its mind. The stages came down. The music stopped. And the authorities turned, in the end, to the saint they had first dismissed. The dancers were gathered up and carried out of the city to a shrine of Saint Vitus in the hills, where they were led through rituals of penance, given small crosses and red shoes, and prayed over for the release of their affliction. Whether it was the shrine, or the silence, or simply that the thing had finally run out of fuel, the dancing faded. By September, the streets of Strasbourg were quiet again. The summer the city could not stop moving was over. And here is where the story becomes a true mystery, because we have the records. We have physician notes and cathedral sermons, local chronicles, and the official notes of the city council. The documents agree on what happened. They danced. What they cannot tell us is why. For a long time, one favorite explanation was poison. There is a fungus called ergot that grows on damp rye, the kind of grain a hungry city would still be eating. Ergot can cause convulsions and hallucinations. It gave us, centuries later, the chemistry behind LSD. Perhaps, the theory went, the bread itself had driven them mad. But it does not quite hold. Ergot poisoning tends to choke off the blood to the limbs. It brings gangrene, not stamina. It is very hard to imagine people dancing for days on poisoned blood in that condition. And harder still to explain why hundreds of them would break in the very same way, at the very same time. The explanation most historians lean toward now is stranger, and in some ways more unsettling, because it does not come from the bread. It comes from the mind. What Strasbourg may have suffered is something we still see today. We call it mass psychogenic illness. It is what happens when real, physical symptoms move through a group of people under enormous stress, carried not by a germ, but by fear and suggestion. It is not lying. That is the part people get wrong. The symptoms are real. The body is genuinely doing what it appears to do. Anyone who has spent time on a hospital floor has seen the edges of this, the way grief can stop a heart, the way panic can take a voice or a pair of legs with nothing physically broken at all. The mind and the body are not two separate countries. They never have been. Now take that and set it down in a starving, frightened, deeply faithful city that already believed dancing could be sent as a curse. One exhausted woman steps into the street and begins to move. Her neighbors, worn thin by hunger and dread and a story they have heard their whole lives, watch her, and something in them answers. The body follows the fear, and the fear spreads the way fear always has, from one person to the next, until 400 of them are moving to a music only their nerves can hear. We like to think we have left that world behind, that we are too modern, too rational, to be swept into something we cannot explain. But mass psychogenic illness has not gone away. It still surfaces in schools and factories and quiet towns, wherever enough people are frightened enough, together. The dancers of Strasbourg were not weak, and they were not mad. They were ordinary people, worn down past the breaking point, carrying far more than a body is meant to carry. And when one of them finally moved, the rest could not help but follow. So tonight, as you let the day go and your own body finally goes still, spare a thought for that long, hot summer 500 years ago, and for the people who only wanted to stop and could not. Rest easy. I'll see you in the small hours.